What's going on, everyone? So one of the real strong suits potentially this upcoming season is the center position, especially for a team that really had their struggles at the center position, right? Victor Wembanyama was your primary starting center, and then it was like, okay, well, who's going to be your backup? And then, Zach Collins was just, let's be honest, he was a disappointment. He really was. He was not great. You had to bring in Bismack Biyombo because you didn't have a center, and it's just, you had this just kind of mess at the center spot. It was one of the big needs and one of the big things that had to be addressed. And then they go and they sign Luke Kornet, and it's like, oh, here we go. Like, okay, great pickup, right? Spurs type of player, guy that has experience, that has kind of built this career as a backup that could really come in, play a role, and be very impactful on both sides of the basketball, right? Somebody that you could even slot alongside Victor Wembanyama at times and just have this kind of big man versatility. I like it, dig it. I think that was one of the better signings. And then all of a sudden, out of left field comes the Kelly Olynyk trade, which, again, I think is an excellent pickup. Right? You talk about a guy that gives you that kind of versatility at the center and power forward spot. Guy you can slot in at the 4, guy that you can slot in at the 5, guy that's not shy from contact, right? He's a guy that is known to be willing to bang with the big boys and get contact and get physical, and guy that can stretch the floor, knock down the 3 ball, veteran, right? That can work with Victor Wembanyama, especially because Wemby wants to take, 8 threes a game. So you kind of have these two guys that, you're adding to your core and foundation in Victor Wembanyama that gives you this kind of depth that you just really didn't have. And I actually think that with bringing in 2 veteran style centers, I think really kind of gives the Spurs this center foundation that they didn't really have. And going into this offseason, it was kind of like, okay, well, what direction are they going to go with the center spot? Do they kind of go with the young route? Do they bring in, do they keep a Bassi and kind of try to see if, they can kind of develop him finally and he can stay healthy? Do they kind of just go get a veteran guy and then a young guy? Do they take a flyer on a guy in the draft? Do they, go and trade for a Walker Kessler or something like that? Right. And look, these are all things that could still potentially happen at some point. Right? This upcoming draft, it could be like, hey, we have plenty of guards, we have plenty of forwards, let's go get a center, right? Or, you end up finding, I'll just use Walker Kessler as an example, right? Whether you love him or not, just an example. But, all of a sudden Walker Kessler is available again and you can get him reasonable. It's like, hey, let's go do that because now you have kind of you can move Wemby to the 4 and that might solve the 4 and 5 spot for the future. And especially with the NBA, particularly this offseason, kind of looking like we're getting a big man resurgence, right? Teams are kind of loading up and stacking up on big men. Teams are looking to play more, dual bigs and stuff, right? And you're going to have to be able to match up against that, right? You're going to have to be able to match up against multiple big men. And again, how do you have the most success, right? It's how chameleon-like can you be? Right? Okay, well, you guys want to go small, right? You're playing a Warriors team. It's like, okay, well, we can go with, a Harrison Barnes at the 4 or a Jeremy Sohan or a Carter Bryant or any of these guys, right? Any of these 6'8" guys alongside Victor Wembanyama. It's like, okay, well, say you're playing a bigger team that, OKC wants to go with, Isaiah Hartenstein and a Chet Holmgren. It's like, okay, well, we could go Victor Wembanyama and Luke Kornet, or we could go, Kelly Olynyk and Victor Wembanyama, right? It gives you those options and those flexibilities to be as, again, chameleon-like as possible, which, we just didn't have that option last year, right? It wasn't even a real thing last year. They tried to play Zach Collins and Victor Wembanyama together on occasion, but Zach Collins was terrible for the Spurs. He was actually, which is unfortunate, but he was actually really good for Chicago, which it was like, man, where was this? If he was this the whole time, they probably never would have traded him, right? He probably would have been starting alongside Victor Wembanyama because he was cooking. He was looking really good, especially when Nikola Vucevic was out and he had to kind of fill in, right? He actually was very good for them. And it was like, man, where has this been? But I wouldn't hate bringing in another kind of 6'10" guy, right? I wouldn't mind. I've seen people throw out Mo Bamba, okay, a Bol, okay, but I personally, if I could, I would look to an Al Horford, right? Like give you a guy that could slot in at the 4 or the 5, right? Give you some experience, get you some championship pedigree, a guy that, has had success and discipline and can kind of help mentor and grow all these young guys from Victor Wembanyama to a Carter Bryant to a Jeremy Sohan, right? Like I think he would be most beneficial for this team. But I like if they just decide to kind of, because the 4 spot you're fine. You have Wemby that can slide and play the 4, but you have Jeremy Sohan, you have Harrison Barnes, you have Carter Bryant who could play that, Julian Champagnie, he's 6'8", right? Like he could play that, right? Like you have several guys that can slot it. Kelly Olynyk can slot it and play the 4 because of his floor spacing ability, right? So like you have options and flexibility there. You don't need to really worry about, okay, well, how are we going to slot in this guy or that guy? Like, you're good at the center spot. You can, to me, just doesn't hurt to kind of have that extra insurance, but you also, you don't want to get a guy that's just going to ride the pine, right? If you're going to get a skilled guy, because, you want your 15th guy, because I see an argument that a lot of people make, right? Which is like, well, after like the top 10, everyone else is irrelevant. And that's just not true, right? You have guys for injury purposes, or you have guys that are your development guys on the back end that you're trying to they're going down to the G League at times and play. Like, you want every roster spot to have a purpose. Yes, sometimes your 15th spot is a Udonis Haslem type guy, right? But that's because he has a purpose. He's not just some throwaway guy. He's there to, help bring the culture and bring the players and get on the guys and be an extension of a coach and all that stuff. Right? I've talked about, like a Kevin Love potentially being that kind of guy where, maybe you bring in him as that extension of the coach type thing, but supposedly he wants to finish in LA with the Lakers or the Clippers. But, you get my point, like a veteran guy, kind of like the idea of these veteran centers, unless you really like a Bol and you're like, hey, this is a guy that we could have play alongside Wemby long term, right? Then it's like, okay, maybe you take a flyer on him and bring him in, but how many minutes are you playing him? Like, at this stage and his age and all that stuff, right? You're almost better off just kind of going with the veteran route this year. Try to put yourself in the best position to win right now. And then, if you kind of want another long-term running mate, go pick that up in the draft or, free agency or pull off a trade at some point, whether it's the trade deadline or at the, in next year's offseason, right? It's kind of how I look at it. I mean, or, if that option presents itself this offseason, you can go make that trade. You can go make that move. But I like the center spot. I think it's one of the stronger positions for the Spurs this year, right? Obviously the guard spot, forward spot, I think is fine. It's just kind of like, even like the guard and the forward spot, it's just kind of like who's going to fill in, what's the role going to be type thing for some of these guys, but we'll see. Anyway, as always, this is a discussion. I pass a question on you. Let me know your thoughts and opinions down in the comments. That being said, if you haven't liked this video, hit that like button. Helps me a lot. So we enjoy these types of videos and I truly appreciate it. Not subscribe channel, hit that subscribe button, turn on the bell notifications. Appreciate y'all. See you in the next one. Thank you.